Good afternoon, everybody. Happy New Year and welcome to another episode of BHBA Family Law Presents Direct Examination with Dan and Lauren. Along with Lauren Youngman from Youngman Reichstein, I'm Dan Bemmel, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst. During each episode of our show, we explore our guest's personal and professional history and dig into a meaningful legal topic. Please continue to join us for our upcoming episodes, always at 12:30 p.m. live on Zoom. Samantha Klein on February 1st, Glenn Schwartz on March 1st, Judge Scott Gordon on April 8th, and Stacey Phillips, Grace Jamra, Michael Hanasab, Aaron Gray, and Chelsea Stevens, and Judge Harvey A. Silberman to follow. Lauren.
Good afternoon, everyone. You will receive your MCLE certificate shortly after the program. Please take a moment to complete the survey that's included with your certificate. The family law section is sponsored by White, Zuckerman, Warsofsky, Luna, and Hunt, and Our Family Wizard. White, Zuckerman, Warsofsky, Luna, and Hunt provides a wide variety of resources to complete almost any project, large or small. They also provide traditional accounting and tax practice services. We invite you to contact them to discuss your specific accounting needs and learn how they can be of service to you. Our Family Wizard is a secure co-parenting platform that supports divorced or separated parents in managing the daily responsibilities of raising children. Specialized features help co-parents organize routines, share files, track expenses and payments, check in at exchanges, send messages, and more, all while thoroughly documenting their activity. That's it for our sponsors. Dan?
Thanks, Lauren. Today, we welcome Peter Walzer. We've never had a guest like Peter, probably because there aren't really any attorneys out there like Peter. He's a true Renaissance man. Today, we're going to try, probably fail, but we're going to try to cover as many different parts of his life as possible. As an attorney, of course, he's a legend with the record to match. Makes sense since he earned his CFLS designation very recently in 1988. And of course, we'll plumb all that legal experience too. So lots and lots to pack into our hour together. First, most importantly, Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dan and Lauren. A pleasure.
Okay, this is going to be fun. Sometimes it feels in interviews, even ours sometimes, like work-life balance questions, the what you do outside the office stuff is a little bit cursory. But I want to start there because you have such a wide range of interests. And I know they actually do inform your practice. So let's start with some of the wilder stuff first. How did you get into extreme sports and what are your favorites?
Well, I don't consider them extreme, Dan. I consider them normal. But some of the things that I've done is rock climbing. My good buddy and mentor, Jan Gabrielson, formerly of Walzer and Gabrielson, I'm talking Stuart Walzer, and I did this rock climbing class, and it was intense. It was a 9-month class. It was life-changing, especially when the leader on belay fell, and I caught him on a cliff face in Paquets on Mount San Jacinto.
And you don't consider that extreme? That's not extreme.
Well, that event was extreme.
Okay.
So other things, surfing, before court in the morning, just going out there at Malibu, surfing, showering on the beach, and then dressing in my suit and coming into court and just being raring to go. Another sort of interesting diversion. I'm not the only surfer lawyer, but I loved it when I did it. And it took me out of the zone of practicing law, the intensity, your mind's completely taken off out of the practice of law.
So do you consider yourself an adrenaline junkie? And besides the diversion, are there any other benefits that you get from these particular sports?
I think the athleticism, the exercise, I mean, it really, my dad was a good example. He was an athlete, he jogged, he worked out at the gym. It's how you keep yourself sane in our crazy business. I mean, everybody does something in athletics, sports, gym, golf, scuba diving, just kept me balanced, but everybody's got to find their own way to do it. And that was my way.
On the other end of the spectrum, you've been a longtime practitioner of meditation, not mediation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it is embarrassing when I get them mixed up in an article or something like that. But yes, I've been meditating since I was 17. I meditate every day, 2 hours a day. I often do long meditations, 6 to 7 hours. And again, that keeps me balanced, sane, calm. But it's still an effort, it's an intense practice, and I'm very devoted to it and built my life around meditation. So
Is it ever hard to find 2 hours a day to do that?
it's always hard to find 2 hours a day to do it. I mean, you come home, you're exhausted, you've got to, build your stamina, and it's a fight. It's the battle of life. That's my mantra. You got to win the battle of life. And that's part of the battle, to find time to be within yourself, to be present, to change your whole focus. And so it's not all outward, but it's inward directed.
How did you get started with meditation so early?
Actually, my dad had a client that they were a meditation center, and he got me interested in it, and he invited them to teach yoga in our living room in Brentwood. And that set me off on the path to meditation and practice. So it was really my dad's influence.
So it's been a lifelong practice for you. How would you recommend somebody new to the practice to get started?
Start with 3 minutes at a time. Find somebody that teaches meditation. And the key is, it's not sleepitation. It's not thinking about stuff. It's focused on the inner world, like, light, joy, love. It's peace. All those are what you want to focus on, and find somebody who will teach you, and just become regular. Whether it's a minute a day, doesn't matter. You got to start somewhere, but regularity is the key to practice.
Is it ever too late to start, do you think, for somebody?
When you're dead, yes.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So basically the lesson is start. No matter what you're doing, find 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be 2 hours a day. Start.
Just start. Just a minute a day, but sit still, back away from the chair, spine straight, eyes focused at the point between the eyebrows, not cross-eyed, and focus. Take a word, peace, and repeat it over and over again.
What about art and music? I know that that's played a big role in your life as well. Can you tell us about those interests?
So anything challenging is fun to me, and I was never musical. I think I might be tone deaf. I don't have enough tone to know if I'm tone deaf, but I took this great class in college, first year elementary musicianship. You had to get up in front of the class and sing a cappella. And I said, if I can do that, I can do anything. I learned to read music. I can play guitar, basically. It's been a joy of my life. And art, through photography, I've been doing photography since I was a kid. My son's a professional photographer. My mother was a fine artist. And it's just art and music are just part of my life.
How did that love of photography develop for you?
Well, my grandpa was a photographer, and I had a dark room when I was a kid. And Dan and you and I shared some fun chatting about photography. And my first real camera was a Nicormat, had a dark room in my bathroom, and it just was. And my daughter was into photography. She got into UCLA through her photography. And my son's a photographer. So, it's been.
Do you miss the dark room in the shift to the kind of digital world, the printing?
I don't really, because I figure Lightroom and Photoshop are just a digital dark room, and I don't miss the chemicals and all that, but it sure was fun being in a dark room and just watching it show up in front of your eyes.
Yeah, it's magic.
It's magic, yes.
Do any of these interests or hobbies inform your work as an attorney or is it just an escape from?
No, I think it does. I mean, what we do is creative. I mean, it's intuitive what we do. You could read all the books, but we have clients whose problems don't fit in any mold, and you've got to be able to read them. You've got to read the other side. You've got to read the judicial officer, the mediator. It's so much happens at an intuitive level. You've got to feel when you need to, take the move, make the move. You got to know when to be aggressive and when to hold back. You got to know when you're getting paid and when you're not. It's so many judgment calls in this business that anything you do to open up your intuitive, your emotional intelligence, whatever you call it, helps. I mean, it can't hurt. So you've got to have another life. This is not a place for technicians. We're not dealing with computers. We're dealing with human beings, not to mention your staff, the employees, your family, everything that is part of life. Family law, you can't get much more real than that.
So are these, I mean, we're kind of dancing around it a little bit. It's not just about avoiding burnout though, right? It's about really having a full life. So what do you tell your younger attorneys, your associates, your family, maybe if you involve them in these outside pursuits, to do to really avoid that burnout and to bring all this into their practice?
Well, I tell my associates to bill as many hours as possible if you really want to know. And don't lead a balanced life. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't know if the younger generation has that problem. They're more balanced. They need to be motivated to work harder and drive more. So it's people of my generation are fighting for the balance and not being workaholics. Younger generation, I want them to bill the hours. So
why do you think that is? Why do you think there's that generational divide that you?
I think they saw their parents killing themselves and they said, I don't want that life. I want to find something for me. And also, I think out there's the idea you can find your passion and get joy from work. It may be illusory, but then they realize they need to buy a house and make a living, and that's when reality meets the road, right?
Yeah, it's called work, not fun, right? Let's talk about that path for you. Actually, I think let's pivot a little bit and talk about your journey on the professional side and how you've built such a powerhouse firm. But let's go all the way back. You talked about growing up a little bit in Brentwood. What was it like growing up in Los Angeles in the 50s and 60s?
I mean, my dad was a Beverly Hills divorce lawyer, and that's when it was a thing. And he started getting into it in the 60s, and he was a major part. Stuart Walzer's my dad. He was a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers in the first certified specialist group. He was on the governor's commission for no default divorce from 66 to 70 when California enacted no fault divorce. He was an instrumental player. He founded the Southern California Chapter of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. And he was a speaker, he was a writer, he was a trial lawyer. He was a fabulous example. Plus, he was a Renaissance man. He was a master gardener. He'd always be reading 3 books at one time. He started the LA County Bar's Lawyer Literary Society. He was a member of the Harvard Club, his Temple Board of Directors, Beverly Hills Bar, LA County Bar. I mean, he was everywhere and did it all.
So that's crazy. What was it like for you growing up in that house with someone like that?
I'm sure it drove me crazy, but it was a good example. It was a high bar to meet. And, we all have issues with our dad. He was impossible to work with at times. And that was a challenge. And that's sort of why I set off on my own and said, I will never work for anybody again. And I will never do family law. One of those became true. I never worked for anybody, but I did become a family lawyer by sort of I had to do it. I had to support a family, and I had a name that was well known, and it was a natural. It turned out to be good for me because I'm a people person. I love people. I love diverse interests. I like going to court. I like settling cases. I like writing. I like speaking. I like teaching. I like mentoring lawyers. All that. You can do all that as a family lawyer. You could be an academic. You could do it all. So, and it covers everything from labor law to immigration to criminal aspects to civil procedure to, real estate, wills and trusts. All of that you can do in family law. And I've done all that. Taxation. I've done crossover talks on all those topics. So you never get bored.
All right. Well, I want to take a step back because you basically preempted my question, which was going to be, did you want to ever follow in his footsteps? We know that's where you ended up. But when you were growing up and you looked at what he was doing, what did you want to do instead? If you
I wanted to be a scientist. Specifically, I wanted to be a chemist. And at age 11, my dad bought me all these college chemistry texts, which I went through and I loved them, but I never had the math ability to really do that. So I basically tried everything else and decided to go to law school when I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And then it just sort of happened. So it was an accidental lawyer, I would say.
So after law school, what was the first thing that you did? If it was an accident coming in, what was it going out?
I opened up my own office in Westwood. I shared an office with Roz Zuckerman. It was $200 a month. We split the rent and split a secretary. It was at the corner of Wilshire and Westwood Boulevard. And I just took off and knocked on the door of every lawyer on my floor. And we had some interesting, rather famous lawyers on that floor, and said, I need contract work. And that's what I did. And I got beaten up by a few, and a few gave me work, and it was trial and error.
What prompted you to go out on your own as opposed to getting a government job or working in a firm?
Well, I guess after working as a clerk for my dad, I said I'd never work for anybody again. So,
but you went back. So how did you end up working with your dad as an attorney?
Well, after 10 years, I got to a certain level, and you get middle level cases, and I wanted to go to the next level, the big cases, the business valuation, the more interesting stuff. And I knew he had 2 more years of practice, 2 years before he was going to retire. This was in 1992, I think. And I just said, give it a try. And it was intense. I mean, for the first year, it was like my greatest fear. But we came to terms, and it really did lift me into a whole different world. It was great.
How did it change your relationship with him?
I mean, it was good. We were close on that level of sharing. I would call it the service, the worry about being a family lawyer, where you get a bunch of family lawyers and they all start talking, and we could share our mutual misery, and he really understood our struggles getting paid, dealing with clients who didn't always follow the program, challenging judicial officers, the system, all of that, the things that nag at us, that keep us awake at night. He was a great buddy, a great colleague, understood it, and didn't have any answers, but he sure could share stories about it.
So at this time, had you already gone out and gotten your psychology degree?
I got that. Yeah, I'd got a degree in psychology about that same time. And that was another diversion, learning about, Gestalt, rational emotive process, therapy. Basically, all these different therapy modalities helped me, and it helped my clients could understand them better, how to listen. basically, they know the answer to most of their problems. They just need to figure it out themselves, and you need to bring it out. And that was one of the good principles, that I didn't have to have every answer. In fact, most times they knew, they just were resistant to face the reality.
What, at this point in your career, what other mentors had the biggest impact on your development as an attorney?
My dad introduced me to Ron Gramberg, who was just an amazing lawyer, fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, lived in a small town called Salinas near Monterey. And again, he was a Renaissance man. Not only did he play the blues, which I loved, and we'd play guitar together, but he could speak, he could write. He was a fabulous lawyer, understands every nuance of tracing, Moore Marsden, the whole family law gamut. And he's a great entertainer and speaker. In fact, he had a band called the Quadrophonics, which were played at an academy meeting in Monterey. And to me, he's a star. Jan Gabrielson, I mentioned him, wrote a book about the practical family lawyer, was my dad's partner, a good friend, climbing buddy, fabulous lawyer. Unfortunately, he retired. Fortunately for him, unfortunately for me, but great guy, still around. Some of the others, boy, I forgot my list. I had a whole list. Chris Melcher, I mean,
we'll get to Chris. We'll get to Chris.
Okay, you'll get to Chris.
Yeah. Enough on Chris. Yeah.
So good.
What about going through your own divorce around this time? What did you learn from that process?
I learned how incredibly painful it is, seeing it through the client's eyes. I learned that it's, after the title of a great book by Abigail Trafford called Crazy Time, what it meant. And we go through these processes, these stages: anger, grief, depression, guilt. But what I learned going through the process, you go them all at the same time, in the same day, in the same hour. It's not like you go through one stage and you go to the next a month later. It's like right at the same time. And I also understood how great having a good divorce lawyer was. My divorce lawyer was a certified family law specialist, Joan Bauman. She was on my floor in Century City, and she was a lifesaver. I mean, really kept me from doing stupid stuff.
What specifically did she do?
I mean, she just said, Peter, don't do that.
Did it change? Did her approach with you and going through it generally change how you approach cases or how you counsel clients?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the not getting frustrated with them, understanding what they're going through, being patient. There's an emotional timeline. There may be a timeline for the court where you got to do your disclosures, you got to do your discovery, you've got to, get to a mediation or a trial. But there's an emotional timeline that you've got two clients going through, one on your side and one on the other side. And that sometimes you just got to wait it out till they're ready to make the move. And they always get there, some longer than others. But you got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to fold them. And sometimes you can push, but they're not ready. They won't get you the documents. They won't do their income and expense declaration. They won't follow through. But when they want to be done, they'll do all that. And the judges are saying, why can't you get this done? Well, you can't tell them, well, client's not ready. They're still stuck in their marriage. Maybe they unconsciously don't want to get a divorce. And what's good about divorce? You're going to see your kids half the time. You're going to have half the amount of money. You're going to have half the amount of income. Nothing good about it. And we're leading them to that place. So if there's some resistance, yeah, that's pretty obvious, right?
Do you share your story with clients?
I do. Sometimes I regret it. It's like they don't want to hear about me. They want to hear about them. So I'm trying to be discreet, but I do like to show, hey, I can relate, but there's so much in their world of pain. I don't know if they care what you say, But I do share it and try to get them to see that I am understanding of it, but they need to go through their own process. My process is not going to help them really. Sometimes I give them the book. I mean, a couple of books, Crazy Time by Abigail Trafford, Mom's House, Dad's House by Isolina Ricci are classics. And I give those to them. Sometimes that book called Splitting, dealing with borderline personalities and narcissists in divorce. I'm blanking on the name of the author, but he's a certified specialist and a psychologist. Oh, Bill Eddy, a lawyer from San Diego. Those are 3 books that I recommend to clients. But all too often, everybody thinks the other side is the narcissist. And maybe they should look in the mirror.
No comment. What were your motivations to start your own firm and to find a partner as opposed to just being out on your own?
I mean, doing it all yourself, it's a lonely life. I mean, I just met with a young lawyer. He said, what are 2 things you'd recommend? And it was yesterday, I had lunch. I said, get some help in your office, man. You know, whether it's your mom, your dad, your friend, get some help, you know. You can even go virtual and get virtual helpers all around the country. The person doesn't need to be in LA, but get some help and join bar associations. I mean, and live in person, meet other lawyers. They'll be your support. They'll be your confidants. They'll give you ideas. We need ideas. We need these tools of the trade like I provided you. Tips. Not everybody can know it all. So I knew I needed somebody to share ideas with, somebody to how do you get business? How do you process the work? I also didn't want to draft interrogatories anymore and discovery. But I find I'm still doing that after 40 years. So you can't get away from it. So, but having Chris as a partner was a lifesaver. I mean, really.
So how did you first meet Chris and what qualities? Chris, obviously a great friend of our program here. How did you meet Chris and how did that partnership first develop?
So my office is in the Valley, and it's been in the Valley since I got divorced. And that's why I moved away from Century City, because I had to take my kids to school and take them home and do all that. So I had to get an office in the Valley. He was on the floor of my first executive suite. And I said, do you want to do some contract work for me? And I saw his work. He knew the Code of Civil Procedure backwards and forwards, which every family lawyer needs to know. He knew criminal law and he tried cases. I think he tried a rape case when I was, and an arson case while I was working with him in the beginning. So this is a guy that could try cases, knew discovery, and was just a great lawyer. He just wasn't motivated. He hadn't found his way. So we turned out to be a perfect match. It was great.
So then how did you first really start growing and put your foot on the gas, marketing the firm, attracting clients, recruiting new talent? What were those early years like?
I mean, I knew what to do. I just didn't have the foundation. You may know how to build a building. I saw my dad do it. I saw how he did it. And some of his lawyers, you know, Dina Kleeman is, you know, a leader of the bar, Paula Kane, all those people my dad groomed. And so I knew how to do it. I just needed a foundation to build my building. And once I had Chris, there were 2 of us. You can build a foundation with 2. With 1, it's much harder. And once we had that stability, one of us could market. And he turned out to be a good marketer too. He has it all. So, and then we found Steve Yoda about 6 years ago, who also has it all. So now we've got 3 of us to build an amazing foundation. So got to have the foundation, then you can start joining the organizations, meeting other lawyers, writing articles, giving seminars. You know, that's what my dad told me, you know, join, speak, and write, you know. that is going to get you business. And meet, the joining means meeting other lawyers, family lawyers, non-family lawyers. Most of our cases come from family lawyers. San Francisco, San Diego, England, France, Germany, Spain, all over the world. Family lawyers need a family lawyer in Los Angeles, and we're the go-to firm.
What's your approach to recruiting associates and mentoring them?
Well, I mean, I hear, and it's our experience, finding lawyers is tough. I mean, and so it's just basically word of mouth, and it's trial and error, and you need so much to be a good associate. And people that want to learn from the best, I mean, we pay for all travel to bar meetings, whether it's Charleston, South Carolina, whether it's England, wherever. We sent our great associate Cynthia Ponce to Chile for a meeting. And you got to be able to put in the hours. You got to be careful, and you got to care about the clients, and you got to be motivated, and you've got to be a fun, interesting, totally secure, happy person.
So
other than that, we have no basic requirements.
other than that, yeah, that's it. Easy. And bill. And you got to bill.
Got to be good with finances in terms of understanding how to do a spreadsheet, how to do Decimaster, calculate a more Marsden. I mean, if you come into my office for an interview and you don't know what more Marsden is, woe be to you. So
do you still get a rush? I want to talk about how the law has changed, and how both the practice and the business of the law has changed over your time in business. But do you still get a rush out of the wins?
I do. I mean, I love just, once you sit in a mediation till 9 o'clock at night or midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, which I've done, and you resolve the people's problems, it's great. Going to court and winning, good, but often it's not clear. There's often an appeal. There's often backlash. It is satisfying to win in court, but often resolving it out of court with our private judicial officer mediators is just as satisfying, sometimes more, because it's solidified. You've got a sure deal. You win in court. There's a lot of post-court backlash that you may suffer from. But yeah, all that's great. And we love serving the clients. That's what we're doing it for. I mean, basically I've talked about me, but it's all about the client. It's helping them solve a problem. And we're problem solvers.
What about the other side? The law, do the losses sting? Do you carry them with you? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, you go out and surf, rock climb, jump off a cliff, whatever you want to do. Bury your head, meditate. It's painful. I mean, and a client, not every case works out. Clients sometimes leave unhappy because they're unhappy and nothing will satisfy them. And that's a loss. We haven't done our job for whatever reason. And our services were very expensive. I mean, any lawyer is expensive. We often joke and say we couldn't afford ourselves. And hopefully we won't have to afford ourselves. But, it's hard, and keeping clients happy and satisfied. Happy may be an exaggeration, but feeling like they're getting what they're paying for it's a tricky business, no doubt.
What do you consider some of your greatest successes in your career thus far?
These mediations where you settle the case. I mean, the Valley case, which Chris talked about, taking it to the Supreme Court, resolving all the issues favorably, including that Supreme Court decision, was terrific. Being president of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, 1,600 of the top family lawyers in every state, was an amazing honor, amazing deal. Chairing the State Bar Family Law section and being part of premarital agreement legislation, fiduciary duty legislation, all that, amicus briefs. That was fabulous. Elkins Task Force, being appointed to that was like, I was one of 7 family law attorneys on that task force. Some of the best judges, judicial officers in the state. It was just an amazing deal. And a lot of the legislation we see today, for good or for worse, is how we practice law is part of family law because of Elkins. And just the collegiality between judges and saying, I want to put this on our judgments, or I want to call a RFO, a request for order, rather than an order to show cause. It happened, it's like, that was my idea. That was great, so that being part of all that was fabulous. I mean, many were being chair of the family law section of the LA County Bar, being president of the Association of Certified Specialists. But it wasn't just a title, it was the people. I mean, it's all about the people, these great lawyers who are willing to give hundreds of hours of their time to make us all better. It's just like, wow. I mean, so who cares about the title? It wasn't about the title, it was about the people,
What about the practice itself? We've talked on some of our prior episodes about kind of the rise of mediation and ADR as a sea change over the last few decades, I guess. Do you think that the mediation industry as a whole is a net positive for the practice or for the parties?
I think it's great. It's better for everybody. When I started, it was in court. There were some, 4-way meetings were a big thing, and judges would tell you to go talk in the hall, but by then you'd spend a ton of money. And, fast forward 40 years, most of the cases you do your disclosures and then you hire a private judicial officer. In 1, 2, 3 sessions, you usually settle the case. The downside of that is we don't always get the easiest litigants now. Those are funneled off to mediators before they even see lawyers. And they don't even see us. They go to a mediator first and they do all that in mediation. Now, some of that could be for the worse, where they don't find out what the other side's hiding. But in reality, how many people are hiding stuff? Everybody knows everything in a marriage. You share an account, you see the person's paycheck. There's not hidden bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. So the easy clients we do not see as much as we did in the beginning, where we could just get in there and resolve the case. Usually in our cases, there's domestic violence, some kind of hiding money, some kind of issue, move away issues. Somebody is off balance, mental illness, drugs, unfaithfulness, all that. That's why they come and see us. There's something difficult in their lives that led them to the point. It's just not your garden variety divorce.
They're not calling you because they've got an easy, simple
yeah. And if they do, I say, have you seen a mediator? Have you gone to, and I have a list of people who could do the job. But that doesn't mean that there are people that go to mediators that shouldn't. I mean, sometimes a mediator will, just to get a deal, sell them down the road. I think it's rare, but it does happen,
Another change that we spoke about a little bit in our prior conversation was the change in DV law that you've seen over the course of your career. What are your thoughts?
I mean, in my world, I generally don't see people getting hurt. I see people using it as a tool to get an advantage in custody battles. And especially with this new coercive control, something that happened 5-7 years ago, I didn't want to have sex and she made me do it, or he made me do it, all coming before the court. sucking up the court's time with trials that need to be had. And what is it? The burden is, more likely than not, it's not clear and convincing evidence. It's not beyond reasonable doubt, but the court can take away your child. And with continuances and delays, you may not see your child for months, depending on, and then it will be monitored visitation, 52 weeks of counseling, all these different things. It's become a tool of the top divorce lawyers to sell somebody's agenda. Now, I'm not talking about the real domestic violence, which again, I don't see that. I'm not in those courts where we see that, where somebody's bloodied and battered, and that's where it's totally justified. In our world, it's tactical and it's unpleasant. And I think the judges' hands are tied where they have to treat every case as serious as it should be treated. But sometimes it's just a tactic, and they can go back for years and years and years. And somebody could, create a diary of everything that happened. And so I see it, I think that the burden should be higher. Maybe there should be a separate domestic violence court to take it out of the family courts. If the legislature feels this is important, fund it so it takes it out of the family law court for normal folks, so they can have their day in court and have decisions being made. It should be treated seriously, but at some point, it's driven a lot of judges out. The DV calendar will take all day, and people that need their cases resolved can't get there. It's also created a separate tier of justice, so the people with money can go to private judicial officers and get their matters handled. I mean, there's a lot of good about it, but it's concerning to us that you just can't go to court and have your matter heard because there's not time to hear it. I mean, our cases get continued and continued and continued. And it's like, what about the support? I'm sorry, I have 3 DVs on my calendar, but my client can't eat. Well, I'm sorry, this is what the legislature says is important, and we can't hear your matter. So
have you seen
that's
more?
My rant.
We'll put a pin in that. But I want to talk about the bench a little bit in terms of going to court. It seems like there's been more turnover lately. Is that just, has it always been that way? And has turnover on the bench changed the practice?
It's always been that way. Elkins came along and said, we want certified specialists. We want more permanency. I would say that part of Elkins was basically ignored. I mean, there are a few token family law specialists on the bench, and it may be because there are not a lot of specialists. There may not be a lot that want to be bench officers. And also the lure of going private, even if they're there, they're become a specialist and they can go make $800, $1,000 an hour being a private judge. And, family law has always been a place for, a public lawyer who became a judge to go on the bench and do their couple of years of penance and go on to something more exciting, I can't think of what would be more exciting than family law, but
yeah, we haven't talked about that at all today. So let's actually use that as a jumping off point. You put together for our materials today an amazing toolbox, your list of your favorite overlooked evidence code sections, not just arcane law. This is stuff that you use and you think everybody should know. I guess my first question is, because of the turnover, how often do you find yourself briefing or explaining the code to the judicial officers?
All the time. I mean, you have to be a master of this because, as judges will tell you, most lawyers don't know the evidence code. And it's like going to a construction job without a hammer, nails, saw. This is stuff we need to know. And the good lawyers know all these and we did skipped over relevance, authentication, secondary evidence rule, and hearsay. Those are a given, and you really got to know that stuff. But these are these things that you wouldn't know. One of the rule is completeness. I can't remember the code section. It's in there. Maybe it's 612 or something like that. Is you go in with one text or one email or one letter, and you don't have the entire string, or the other side does, and you know about Your Honor, I'd like to see all the text in this string because I need to see the context. The other side didn't produce it. The judge should strike that evidence. This whole thing about immigration, and you can't mention somebody's immigration status, brand new statute came up in one of my hearings recently. There was an issue about the motives of the other side in terms of getting married in a premarital agreement. Judge couldn't hear any of that evidence of the person's immigration status. We were talking about this rule on ceremonial marriages. Everybody that does a lot of prenups has found out their clients never really got married, right? And there's a evidence code section. Chris pointed this out to me, that ceremonial marriages are presumed to be valid marriages. A presumption, could be overcome, but there is a presumption. So these little things that are there to help lawyers, they're common sense stuff, but if you can cite a code section, you're way ahead of the game, right?
Have you ever learned any of these code sections or rules that you keep in your toolbox now from someone surprising you or using it against you effectively?
Probably all of them. I remember one lawyer, the judge didn't like our client and, was attributing all sorts of things, but we had some texts and we wanted to introduce them into evidence. And the other side's rule of completeness, Your Honor, evidence code, I can't remember the section, but you probably have it in front of you. And judge says, yeah, we're keeping that out unless you have the entire string of text over 4 years. I'm not letting it in. The judge had it out for us, but still, I never forgot that. That's how lawyers learn. That hits you once in the head and you will never forget it, right? So it's good to know this kind of thing.
Do you think for an attorney who follows your advice, you've told us what you think a young attorney should be doing if they're just starting out, getting involved in the bar, learning, doing all these outside activities. Do you think the family law business still provides a good opportunity for a young attorney?
I think it's great. There's so much opportunity and there's so many niche practices. So many of the experts are retiring, whether it's a specialty in child abduction, Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Enforcement Act, UIFSA, which is Child Support Enforcement Collection. The old timers who did this stuff are retiring. A lawyer who knows something about pensions. I once gave a program, Pensions Made Easy, and you learn so much, but there's nobody around anymore who knows retirement plans, pensions, the ins and outs of tax issues. There's so many niche practices. Domestic violence, that is a full-time, you could just specialize in that and make a living. And you generally could do it as a one-woman shop. You don't need have a whole law firm. You could do crossover issues, you could do premarital agreements, cohabitation agreements. I've specialized in all these things at different points in my practice, but you can't do it all. Recently we were looking for somebody who's an expert on interstate and international custody laws. And I know a lot about it, but that's not all I do. So, and you could have a nationwide practice in doing that and travel from state to state. There's so much. Knowing the laws of foreign countries, Southeast Asia, Latin America. just other languages. I mean, there's so much here in LA. You can create a niche or several niches like I did.
Is that a trend that you're seeing? Is that something that wasn't as common when you first started practicing and you're seeing a lot more of now, people specializing in very particular subfields of the family law world?
I actually saw it more early on, and I don't see as much now. And I don't
Why do
know
you think
why
that
that.
is?
I think it because people don't want to do the hard work to learn a specialty and promote it, you know.
If you could go back, right now, right? I mean, you kind of talked about it with Elkins a little bit. If you could wave a wand and improve either the bar or the way the cases move through the system, what would be the biggest changes that you would want to see? I mean, within reason, but budget considerations, but you can't have 100 new courts, but within reason, what would you want to see happen?
I mean, I'd like to see less politics in terms of the legislation and more rational legislation taking into account. I mean, this is like if I had a fairy wand, what I would like.
Yeah.
This is not reality. This is Peter's
in charge.
Fantasy that people would act rationally and human beings would not act like humans. But the legislature is an emotional body. There are less and less lawyers in it. And I think that's hurt it. The bar would be made up of lawyers policing lawyers. I just think that, a lot of problems with when politics, the whole politics of domestic violence, I think has hurt the practice. And trying to create fault back into family law is basically what it's done. It's gone full cycle. And looking at this, my dad was part of creating no fault in California, and the legislature has brought it back. And basically, people want, for various reasons, gender politics, bring fault back into family law. And that's what it's done. So the judges will hear hours and hours of testimony about how he or she, talked mean to them 5 years ago. So I think that if I had my magic wand, I'd have a more rational way of enacting legislation and vetting legislation. But people react from their gut, and I think that's my learning. Judges react on emotion, less on the law and application of the law than reacting. I don't like this person, or this person did this bad thing. We're going to do something. I don't like the lawyer, so we're going to react accordingly. So, but that's fairyland and not really realistic. I think considering what we have, we do pretty well in terms of processing family law cases and the enormous amount, and the judges work really hard to get the cases through. I think their hands are tied with a lot of the rules and legislation, but we do pretty good for humans.
Well, in the last couple minutes we have before we run out of time, we want to ask you some recurring questions that we've been posing to almost all of our guests. One of them is, what would you want your legacy in the family law community to be going forward, or even more broadly?
I would want it to be service to others. I think the more service you give in your life to the bar, to the clients, it comes back to you in amazing ways. It creates a whole world of friends. I know a family lawyer pretty much in every state, every country, every province of Canada, from Mexico to Cape Town, South Africa, to Sydney, Australia. I mean, I got so much back, and if you give to the bar, you get back, and that service pays you back. And to any lawyer is, by doing that, the money comes. But by focusing on the money and what you're going to get out of it, you're just like you might as well be a ditch digger, you might as well be anybody else. It doesn't make it meaningful, but by giving to the practice, you get back. And also creating a professional, we didn't talk about ethics, but doing the right thing makes you feel better, makes everybody feel better. There is a culture, if all you do need to be as a family lawyer is to say no and be nasty. There are plenty of those out there. Anybody can do that, but not everybody can do this practice the ethical right way, honestly, and when you cheat, lie, and steal, like many of us do, the only person that gets hurt is you. You may have a big bank account, but you'll die with a big bank account. And so what good is that? It's more important to do it right, ethically, to have other lawyers respect you. That's worth a lot, to have your kids respect you, to have your exes respect you, to have your spouses respect you, know they can trust you, know your word is your bond. That's everything. Without that, you're just another loser lawyer.
Yeah,
Another rant.
No, not at all. Not at all. One of the things that's been so great about this hour is that you've given, without us even asking, you've offered so much advice to experienced attorneys, new attorneys that we know watch and watch consistently. I am curious though, if you could go back and you can pick the time, whether that's 13-year-old rebel Peter or working for his dad, Peter, at any of those points, if you could give your younger self some advice on your own journey and your own path, is there anything you'd want to say to you or change your direction at any of those moments?
I think I'd like to have spent more time in court, not because of the fight, but I'd like to have sat in court and taken the time to just sit for days and days and just watch the judges and lawyers. And I've done that as a pro tem judge, but I like to do more of that. And also watch the really fine lawyers in our practice, what they do, and just take that time. I think unless you're working for somebody, which I never did, you really don't have that mentoring to see how the good lawyers actually do it in court. And it's hard to get trial experience, but you can go down there, you can volunteer for Levin and Quinn, you can volunteer for Harriet Buhai, get that experience and give back. And again, you're going to learn the evidence code. And that's why I did my piece on the evidence code. Know the evidence code, know how to try a case. Even if you're going to be a mediator, even though if you don't ever want to see a courtroom again, when you learn those tools, you learn about people, you learn about judges, you learn about how to be a good lawyer. And I wish I had done more of that.
All right. Well, this is perfect timing. And thank you so much for everything, Peter. This was a lot of fun and it was really fantastic. Everyone, please mark your calendars now to join us for our next episodes. They're all at 12:30 p.m. on the first Wednesday of each month. As Dan mentioned earlier, we've got Samantha Klein, Glenn Schwartz, Judge Scott Gordon, Stacey Phillips, Grace Jamra and Michael Hanasab, Aaron Gray and Chelsea Stevens, and Judge Harvey A. Silverman, all coming up. Thank you to Genna, Kathleen, and Belinda at the bar, the Family Law Executive Committee, which is currently led by Aaron Gray and Chelsea Stevens, and of course, our section sponsors. Most importantly, thank you, Peter, again, for being here and sharing so much.
Thank you for having me, Dan and Lauren. Really appreciate it.
All right, everyone, we'll see you next month.